As you indicated, I've been in the snow industry, at least in the magazine side of the business, for 100 companies in the snow and ice management industry. These are private companies that perform services on commercial properties, universities, businesses, your banks, your restaurants, your shopping malls, your outdoor shopping centers. And so these guys do quite a bit of snow and ice management throughout the U.S., and we had an hour and a half discussion at the back end of this meeting. And obviously, if you're doing millions of dollars in snow, you've been successful, so you have at least more than half of a brain, I guess. And so throughout this conversation, we're talking about the issues that are facing the industry. And after an hour and a half discussion with 70 of the brightest minds in the industry, it came down to the top three issues facing this industry were insurance, insurance, and insurance. And quite frankly, at this point, I'd been in the industry 15 or so years, and I thought, oh man, here they go again, complaining about insurance and insurance rates. And I just kind of thought it was the nature of the business. But for whatever reason, we made a commitment at that conversation. There was a lot of passion in the room to take a look at the insurance rates and the insurance issues that they were running into. And I personally started meeting with every insurance carrier, agent, and broker I could find to start diving into the issues facing the snow and ice management industry. And interestingly enough, I found that insurance wasn't the issue. It was a symptom of the issue. The issue was really three or four different issues. Number one, the snow and ice management industry not taking responsibility for itself. And I think these are all equal. I don't think anyone's, in higher quality or importance than the other. Number two, the insurance carriers insuring this industry and not understanding the industry. Number three, the laws in this country, and I think that's more of the biggest issue. The laws in this country that are not protecting businesses, that are not protecting small businesses, that are really making it a free-for-all in the industry. And finally, and just as importantly, the outside world, whether it's insurance companies, property owners especially, not respecting this industry. So the property owner side of it is really the fourth piece here. And the property owner is very simply just pushing all the liability down to the snow and ice management company. And we'll get into some of that. But so as we looked into this, and one of the functions or one of the actions that I had taken in that year period was walking into these insurance professionals, like I said, carriers, brokers, and agents, and showing them that, hey, there's a group of folks in this industry that you can insure, and you can do it profitably. And I'll get into some of the numbers. But, you have to look at some of the things that they do within their operations in order to make sure that they're a good risk for the insurance world. And, they would look at me and kind of take a look at the things that I was talking about. And this gets to, the standard itself. And I'll walk through this. This is the founding of ASCA up on the screen. But the question was asked, and as I would sit there, I would say, hey, here's the loss runs from these 25 top companies. And as you can see, the profit on these is 80% because their premium, if it was $100,000 for premium, their losses were $20,000 or less, which to an insurance carrier, that's pretty good for a business such as this. And the conversation would go to, well, what are they doing that's different from others? Or what are they doing that they have in common to make it that? And it comes down to some very basic things in the snow and ice management industry. Number one, they train their employees and they document it. Number two, they have pre-season site inspection reports. And we're going to get into more of the detail on these in a bit. Number three, they have in-event documentation. What is in-event documentation? When you go out to plow snow, to de-ice, put salt down, you mark down what time you got there, what time you left, what you did when you were there, what you didn't do when you were there, when you're going to come back and finish it up. Maybe there were trucks in the loading docks. Obviously, you can't go in and manage snow and ice when there's trucks in the loading docks, so mark down that you didn't do it, and you'll be back at 8 a.m. when the truck's late. You have you have a post-event process, and you have weather service reporting. All of this stuff that matters to manage risk in your business is the basis of the industry standards for the snow and ice management industry, and it's the basis of ANSI, ASCA, A1000. Okay? It is a differentiating factor within your business. And as I explained to them, that's what they do differently. They said, okay, well, that's pretty good. And the very same question came out of about 30 different meetings with insurance carriers. Well, what are the industry standards? And at this point, I had a PowerPoint up there in all these meetings, and I came back and would say, well, we just went through them. Training your employees and documenting it, pre-season site inspections, and in-event documentation, and post-event processes, and weather service reporting. And the same question came back to me 30 different times, 30 different ways, but essentially it was, where are they written down? And at that point, they were not. So, when we founded ASCA 4 years ago, we had a mission. Number one was putting in writing the industry standards. Okay, and I'll get through some of this in a minute. The insurance carriers then would ask, okay, well, fine, you're going to put industry standards in writing. How do we know that they're going to have read them? So we developed some education, and I'll get into that, but it's based on the industry standards. Interestingly enough, okay, fine. So you've got industry standards. You've got education, so we know they've been educated on it. But how do we know they've actually implemented that into their business? And I said, well, can't you figure that out in underwriting? And of course they said no. So we had to come up with a verification process. And then we're going to get into the legislative side of things. But those are the four pillars of the founding of ASCA. And so you have to ask yourself, remember, you know, as I said in the beginning, there were a number of issues. Number one, the industry taking responsibility for itself. Creating written industry standards is the industry taking responsibility for itself, so we've done that. One of the other questions we asked was, do property managers care? And should they? Is this quality work?
Don't think so.
This is December 22nd, 2014. 2 in the afternoon. Here's the problem. It stopped snowing at 8 a.m. The scope of work for that contract essentially states that you're supposed to start managing snow and ice prior to the snow beginning, work throughout the sewer, so the storm, and then you stop when it's completed. Well, obviously they haven't done that. Okay, here's another one. This is at 8 at night the same day. Anytime you see blue, that's a bad thing to have snow in. Or maybe you just want to keep some snow in the handicap spots. So you're going to need new landscaping in the spring, because that's a quality contractor. I like this one because that's where we store the shopping carts, if you look closely. So, can property managers be part of the problem? Now, I ask that because they've obviously hired a contractor. They've done their job protecting themselves. They said, here's the scope of work I want you to abide by. But I also know that that happens to be a seasonal contract that has been signed for about 1/3 the cost that it's going to take to maintain that property throughout the winter. I also know that they've taken all the liability and pushed it down onto the contractor. Okay, they can be part of the problem. Now, once again, what's the snow industry side of things? How do we differentiate a good contractor from a bad contractor? It's a sales and marketing game, and there isn't a real good differentiation right now. Following industry standards is the first step. Okay? Now, we're going to get into some of this here real quick, but why should a property manager care when they can pass their liability onto the snow and ice management company, and that's what they do, through hold harmless language and indemnification language. Now, here's the problem. The insurance carriers 3 years ago broke out the snow industry from, it used to be buried in a policy with either a paving company or, with a paving company's policy or a landscaping company's policy, because those are the two most popular folks that provide services in this industry, and so it's a secondary service. They weren't paying a lot of attention to it, and so when they broke it out 3 years ago, they figured out that snow contractors pay $500 million annually for their snow and ice management insurance policies.
Million?
And yeah, 500 million. Whoa. The problem is that's what the insurance companies are paying out in claims annually. And so it's a 2-to-1 loss ratio for the insurance carriers. So what do the insurance carriers do? They get out of the business. And so the CNAs of the world, the State Farms of the world, the Farmers Insurances of the world are insuring very little snow and ice management these days.
So Kevin, tell me, what are the looks of these lawsuits? What do they look like? What are they? Can you describe some of the losses?
Yeah, a female with high heels on decided that it was a good idea to go out in the middle of a blizzard and go shopping, wow, and slipped and fell in the snow and ice, and somehow that's somebody else's fault. Okay. 3 days after this time, I could go on and on and on. A lady in Kansas City, Missouri, walked up to a bank machine, took money out of the bank, walked back to her car, sat down, picked up her phone, and made a phone call. 4 minutes and 55 seconds later, the ambulance shows up. She goes to the hospital and, goes through the whole process. Next day, files a slip and fall claim. Now, the reason I know it was 4 minutes and 55 seconds is the contractor that got the call that there was a claim against him called up the property manager and said, I know you have 24-hour surveillance. Can you pull the video down from this time? She never fell, but she filed a slip and fall claim.
Oh.
He called up his insurance company because by law that's what you have to do, and he said, listen, I'm going to have a claim against me. It's coming in. Don't worry about it, though. I have her on video. She never fell. They put the information into the computer because that's what they do, and that's their processes and procedures, and the adjuster didn't read the notes in the file and picked up the phone and called the lady and said, would you like $5,000? And the lady said, of course. Thank you very much. I'll settle the case right now. A week later, the contractor in Kansas City, Missouri, got a letter from his insurance company and said, thank you very much for your premium. You have now been dropped.
Oh, jeez.
Middle of winter. He's got $1 million snow business. He has no insurance. He can't go out and perform services until he turns around and gets insurance. So he does everything he can do in the next 24 hours, and he signs an insurance policy for 100% of an increase over what he was paying. His insurance rate doubled overnight.
It's amazing. The University of Michigan's kind of a large target also. I'm not sure if Jim Kennedy can hear this. But you might want to pipe in on this. I know that we all have to be careful of this nuisance lawsuit business. So, okay, I thought I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead. That was interesting.
No, please ask any questions you may have. There is a number of cases that are out there, especially in Michigan, and I'm going to talk about some progress that we've made in Michigan. But if I can quickly grab this now that you brought that up. I can read actually a lawsuit from the state of Michigan, or at least some details from it. And of course, when you're looking for something, it's never close at hand, right?
Take your time. We can edit this out.
Here it is. Here we go. So this was in Michigan. The plaintiff claimed that he was caused to fall to the ground with great force and violence and to suffer severe, grievous, and permanent personal injuries, disability, and damages, the full extent and character which are unknown, but which will include but are not limited to subarachnoid hemorrhage to the brain, hematoma requiring surgery, head injury, injury to sinus, fracture of skull and orbit, injury to neck, back, spine, jaw, upper and lower extremities, various and diverse injuries to the extremities, pain, suffering, discomfort, disability, extreme physical and emotional suffering. And the list continues on.
So did you just read? Did you want to show this on the screen, or you just wanted to read that?
I don't have that on the screen.
I
wanted to read it for an example, because if you read that, the guy's almost dead.
Yeah.
And the insurance carrier came to him and said, "We'll give you $3,000." He said, "Okay." I mean,
totally amazing.
It's ridiculous what's going on out there. I can go on and on and on with these lawsuits. I can talk about the lady in Philadelphia who went to the dollar store to return something. Process that for a second. Most people start laughing right about now. She went to the dollar store to return something.
Okay.
When she was in deposition, the Percocet she was on, she didn't take that day. The Percocet, so she wasn't impaired. She's on the Percocet for the car accident she was in, of course, which she has another lawsuit going. Her AIDS hasn't been detectable for years. And you start going through all of these things, and when the defense attorney for the contractor said, "Can you give me your work history for the past 10 years?" Her attorney's answer was, "Well, that's not applicable." The reason it wasn't applicable is she didn't have a job. She's a professional lawsuit filer. Okay, so you get down to the facts here, and $1 billion paid annually. There's 30,000 plus slip and falls, snow and ice related, filed each season. Of those, 35% are outright dismissed. Of the 65% that are left, 72% of them are settled for $20,000 or less. The actual average for a slip and fall claim, snow and ice related, is $15,132 for the settlement. Okay? They're nuisance suits intending for a quick payout, knowing the insurance companies are going to pay them. Now, and this gets back to the standard. This is the most important stat that's out there, because most of the time, more than 50% of the time, the reason a claim is settled is lack of documentation. And if you think about our industry, snow and ice management companies, the crews at the University of Michigan cannot plan out when they're going to manage snow and ice. They're like firefighters. They go when it snows. It doesn't matter if it's 2 a.m. It doesn't matter if it's Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, a birthday, a holiday. If you go into last year, it started snowing in Michigan pretty much the second last week of January. It didn't stop snowing until the first week of March. You had an entire winter in 6 weeks, and it never stopped. Your crews were going and going and going. And that's just the way it is in this industry, and that's fine. But what did you do on the University of Michigan, for example, at Dormitory A at 2:34 in the morning on January 14th? If you can't prove that, you're going to lose your court case. It's never going to get to court because only 15% of them get to court. So, unfortunately, this is what it leads to. This is an actual sign in New York. The advertisement for the plaintiff's attorneys. $463,000 settlement for a snow and ice fall down.
It's amazing.
If you look really closely in the bottom right-hand corner, prior results does not guarantee a similar outcome. They're attorneys. They got their own disclaimer that's on there, and it's even in white where you can't see it in the snow. It's
sort of perversely funny.
Exactly.
I know. I'm in the back of my mind. I'm thinking there's got to be a smart campus solution to all this, which is a larger discussion we have. I think we can make your snow. You'd be a good candidate, knowing that you need documentation. But go ahead. This is very interesting.
So this is what it leads to. This is in New Jersey. This is their marketing page on their website for their snow plowing insurance. We've decided not to offer snow removal program for this year. Please don't call us. Please seek coverage elsewhere. Good luck. They're an insurance company that sells snow insurance that's no longer selling snow insurance. Okay? So, I'm a very uplifting speaker at times. But that's the reality of what's going on out there, and that was the need for the industry standards and everything that's out there. So, there is a certain responsibility, once again, the snow industry taking responsibility for itself so that we can positively influence the outside world, which we're doing. Very first thing we did was we put together the industry standards. And I'll tell you how we got to ANSI, and I'll tell you how all this came about. But we had our industry standards committee had met. It had to be 6 months when we first developed the standards from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. every Monday morning, and we walked through about what the details were of all of the things that you should be doing in a snow and ice management company to protect yourself, to protect your company, to protect your property owners, your people that you're servicing, and to protect the insurance carrier. It is your job as a professional to do all those things. You need to protect everybody, and you do that through documentation and providing good services. So as we developed the industry standards, we went through. I talk about it being a living, breathing document because we, as an ANSI standards development organization, it's our job to continually review and revise and update the document. We just went through that process, and we're continually going through it. So things will change within the standard, especially as technology changes and other things happen. Right now, it's acceptable to have written documentation of your in-event processes. So we showed up at 3:32 in the morning. In the future, I could envision that. I'm not saying this is the way it's going to go, but I would envision that being GPS required by the industry standard. I don't know if that's a year from now or 10 years from now, but I can envision that being a very, very real possibility. But we originally released the standard to the snow and ice management industry as our own standard. And the other part of it being a living, breathing document is you have to listen to not only your industry, but you have to listen to the outside world. And the standard ended up in a court case. And the plaintiff's attorney said, that's a pretty good standard, but it's not the most credible standard that's out there. And so we took that information and we sat down as a committee and we talked about it and said, okay, well, this is a pretty easy question. What's the most credible standard that you can get? And it's ANSI. So we went to the American National Standards Institute and we became an accredited standards development organization through ANSI. And then we went through and we revised our standard. And we went through the ANSI process.
Kevin, do I understand this correctly that you had challenges from other snow contractor associations about developing an ANSI standard?
No, we had we did not. There is another organization out there that wants to create best practices, but it's really the same thing as the ANSI standard. So we're talking with them right now about how we might be able to work together so that we don't have duplicate efforts.
Yeah, okay. The reason I asked that, and Jim Kennedy knows, is that we spend a lot of money, maybe up to a third of our money, O&M money, on keeping things clean and hygienic. Mm-hmm. We had a bit of a problem with one of the trade associations challenging us on, or one of our colleagues. The Simon Institute was the organization we went to, saying that we don't want to be a standards developer, but we would like to see a standard ANSI standard for custodial services, given the size of the, mm-hmm. For all the reasons, injury, quality, hygiene, and mm-hmm. we were challenged. The Simon Institute eventually won, but when you were speaking of other players in the industry wanting to claim to establish the standard of care, when you become ANSI accredited, that's the closest as you can get to a document or a standard of care that could be adopted by the federal government. I noticed you have some right. Part of your talk is on the legislation, so I just wanted to interject that observation. Lawsuits and contentious about who's going to set the standard of care is a familiar territory for us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And being an organization as large and as visible as you are, you're more susceptible to these things that could have negative impact on the overall university. So, working with ANSI, like you said, it's one step away from being a federal mandate, and the federal government does some things to support the ANSI side of things. But talking into some of the stuff that's in the standards, and I gave the overall overview, and this is actually the table of contents from the ANSI standard, ANSI ASCA A1000. And up until you get to number 4, it's really just ANSI detail stuff that you have to have. And remember, I said we released the document, and then we went back and we went through the ANSI standards process, the development process, after we had already released them. and then we re-released them as an ANSI document in January of 2014. We were really proud that when we went through the ANSI process, the body of the document, we actually only changed 12 words. So we went through it the first time. We did a pretty good job on our own anyways. What we didn't do well was provide definitions. And when we went through the ANSI process requires you to have 3 groups that review and vote on the standard. And one of them is your core audience that's going to be using the standard, in our case, no contractors. Another group is your customers. Now, we hadn't done that the first time through, and what the customers really asked us to do as we provided and developed the standard was, you know what, we like everything that you've done, and they made some comments. That's where the 12-word changes came from. But they said, there's some things out there that we would really like defined. And quite interestingly, they made some really good points, and so we created 22 key definitions. One of the most important definitions that's out there is a term that should never even have been introduced to this industry, and that term is zero tolerance. People will sign contracts that say we have a zero tolerance snow policy on this property. The only way to achieve zero tolerance in the snow and ice management industry is to put a tent over the property. That's it. You cannot plow snow until there's snow on the ground. And you cannot have zero tolerance if there's snow on the ground. So it doesn't work. And so anybody that signs a zero tolerance contract, we've provided a definition. And that definition essentially says that it is not achievable. And the process in achieving zero tolerance is to begin with a pretreatment of a de-icing material, work to plow and de-ice throughout the storm, and then you stop when the job is done and you have bare and wet conditions. That's the only way to achieve zero tolerance.
Question.
So the plaintiff's attorneys...
Kevin, do you guys deal with de-icing of airplanes?
We do not. Okay. We deal with these private snow and ice management companies that provide plowing and de-icing services. As close as we get to the plains is some of our members will plow and maintain runways. But we do not have anything to do with anything that takes off. So
that's still a pretty...
Anyway, so we... Yeah, no, that's still close. I get it. And that insurance policy is a little bit more expensive than a shopping mall.
Oh, yeah.
So, but then we get into the secondary side of things. And if you look at number 5, I'll go back. Number 5 is the education and training detail. I've always said that we're dealing with snow and ice and managing snow and ice. This is not rocket science. But the ANSI standard covers the details of the things that you need to do in your business. And so number 6 is the pre-season site inspections, and number 7 is your in-event documentation, and number 8 gets into some your post-event side of things, and number 9 is environmental stuff. And then finally you get into number 10, which is your weather service standards. Why do you need to have weather service standards? Why? Because quite often when a slip and fall lawsuit is filed, they find out when they look back at their weather service reporting that it did not even snow that day or that week.
Just amazing.
It's unfortunate.
The mind boggles.
So here's some of the education and training stuff. And I know that's a little bit small, but if you take a second to look at it, once again, the rocket science side of this, we give you the detail of what you should train your employees on. Well, why don't you train them on what to wear? It gets cold out there. Bring an extra pair of gloves. Have an extra pair of extra jacket in the car. You know, train them on being safe on the property. Train them on the exact requirements of their job. In a snow and ice management process, you're going to have somebody driving a plow truck. You're going to have somebody driving a salt truck or a de-icing truck. You're going to have a sidewalk crew with shovels. You might have a machine that's going up and down that has a snowblower on the front of it. You might have somebody in a skid steer. You might have somebody in a loader. Okay? Anybody that comes in and says, I got the experience, okay, great, you're hired. You know what? Make sure they're trained on what they're going to be doing. It's that stuff. What are your processes and procedures? What is your documentation policy? That's a key one. Walk through and train them on what they need to do for the job and write it down that you've done it and have them sign off on it. It's not that hard. You can have an Excel document that you open up, you put in all the people in there, they sign it when they show up, they sign it when they leave, you sign, you know, who provided the training and the date that it happened on and the topics of the training. So the standard details that stuff. And it goes through that for in-event documentation. It goes through it for your pre-season site inspection reports and all of that stuff. Now, I'm going to breeze through this a little bit because this isn't about the standard, but remember when the insurance carriers in the outside world said to us, well, great, you've got a standard, how do we know they've been trained on it? So right on our website, we created ASCA Certified Education. You can access it from the web, 24/7, $15 a class, 10 classes to get certified. And if you look at the very first class there, education and training to meet industry standards. And then you go down, we've got documentation to meet industry standards, we've got post-event processes, we've got all these things. So we've provided the education now on the industry standards. Okay, I'm going to get through that. So that was built to satisfy insurance requirements. I talked about verification, but I didn't get very specifically into it. But this was the more interesting part to us. And this is fairly new, and companies have been getting this verification certification for about 2 years now. 20 companies in the U.S. have earned it, but you may be familiar with ISO 9001. ISO 9001 certification, very, very popular up in Michigan, because if you want to sell anything to the big three automakers, you're not selling it to them unless you've got your ISO 9001 certification.
Right. Yeah.
Interestingly,
that is interesting. The multinationals are very familiar with ISO 9001 for years. It's one of the older ISO documents as a management standard, or if you want to allocate capital. Our industry, the education industry, even though it has international pretensions, doesn't seem to want to establish some basic level of understanding among themselves. And so you bring up when you see 9001, there's an education management standard we're trying to deal with. But in general, we're dealing with you're close to manufacturers that have to deal with global trade, and we're not. We're still very much a local type of an industry and very competitive.
Well,
yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and ISO has a marketing problem, and if you talk to them, they'll tell you that. There is a perception that it's only for manufacturing companies, and it's not. All ISO is a quality management system that ensures you have the processes and procedures to ensure, in our case, service quality. In a manufacturing company's world, service would be changed to product. But it ensures you can do the job that you've committed to doing. And so when you look at the other side of it is, okay, how do we incorporate the industry standards into that? Well, it's pretty simple. We just added the SN 9001 to it. ISO in the United States is managed by a partnership, essentially, between the American National Standards Institute and the American Society of Quality. And it's called, the acronym is ANAP. They allowed us to create SN 9001 to work with ISO. SN, this is not one of our better marketing moves, or maybe it is, I don't know, but the SN stands for snow. And it ensures not only that you can deliver the service quality, but also that you've implemented the standards into your organization. So the third-party auditor comes in, and they audit your processes and procedures to ensure that you can provide the service quality, and they go through and they do the audit of your pre-season inspection reports and your training documentation and your in-event documentation. Okay? So I'm going to fly through some of this. This is the ISO side, and that's more detail that I normally do. But here's what it comes down to. And look at it from a plaintiff's attorney's perspective. When a plaintiff's attorney gets a claim, a case, they ask 3 questions. And those questions are, can I win this claim, lawsuit? How quickly can I win it? And remember, 85% of the time, when they're going to get a settlement, it doesn't make it to trial. It doesn't make it to court. The insurance companies are settling, because the insurance companies didn't understand the snow and ice management industry, so they're just giving payouts left and right. That's how they're losing $500 million. But so can I win it? How quickly can I win it? And how much can I win it for? And that's all they're going to ask. They're going to find out really quickly. Companies following the industry standards, they're not going to be able to win it fast, because we're going to give them the documentation they need to fight. They might not even, they likely are not going to get a settlement. So why do I want to start going after these guys? And if I'm not going to get a settlement, I mean, I certainly can't win. So if you go back, and if you remember the industry stats, this is nationally in the U.S., 30,000 slip and false lawsuits, 35% that are dismissed, 65% are left, and 72% are lost or settled for 20 grand or less because they're nuisance suits. The ASCA has been around for 4 years, and last year, for the first time ever, an A-rated insurance carrier started recognizing the ASCA certified education and our ISO/SM9001 certifications for better insurance rates, or in some cases, just insuring people or companies. So we have the first verifiable data, and it is huge. I've got the industry stats on the left, and on the right, it's the same stat, but for the ASCA's insurance program. In the ASCA's insurance program, 70% have already been outright dismissed.
Wow, that's dramatic.
It's dramatic, absolutely. The number that have settled is 20%. So once again, dramatic. 10% are still currently open, and these lawsuits can drag on for a year or two. But if you look at their numbers, 8% settle for more than 20 grand and 15% go to trial, you're looking at 23% there. We're only at 10. Once again, a dramatic reduction. And even in the average settlement, 1/3 the average settlement of the national average. So following the ANSI standards, and especially when you prove you can implement them through the ISO certification and verification, tremendously increases your odds, even when you get a claim, of winning that claim. Because once again, and I went through the stories, they're nuisance suits intending for a quick payout. Mm-hmm. So that's all that stuff is about the industry taking responsibility for itself. And I'm going to, once again, because this is really about standards, I will touch base on some of our legislative efforts. And now that we've got the industry taking care of itself, we've moved our focus onto the legislative side, because now we can sit down with legislators and say, listen, we've implemented ANSI standards. We have implemented an education and a verification system for certifications for both the individual and the company. We still need help. And so at the federal level, the Lawsuit Abuse Reduction Act passed the House of Representatives last fall. The Lawsuit Abuse Reduction Act would change the federal rules of civil procedure and make it mandatory for judges to impose sanctions on plaintiffs and their attorneys that are found to have filed frivolous lawsuits. This is just for frivolous lawsuits. So the lady that walks up to the bank machine takes money out.
Has that been signed, though?
It is Senate Bill 401, and it is sitting in the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. It needs to get to the Senate floor to get voted on at the Senate, and then we'll have to see what the President wants to do with it if it gets through the Senate. So I have not had an update on that recently, but that would be in the federal court system. But the interesting thing is, once the federal courts adopt changes to the federal rules of civil procedure, very quickly the states also make those same changes. So it will flow down to the state level if it gets through. Quite frankly, the plaintiff's bar is very, very powerful.
Yeah.
And are they going to win the battle, or is the National Federation of Independent Businesses and the American Tort Reform Association going to win the battle? Because those are the ones that are there. Now, we've signed on to support it, and we've done that, and we've been to Washington a number of times. This is a group of snow and ice management companies that are explaining how Stephen's explaining how his insurance rates went from $10,000 to $90,000 in a 3-year period, just for his commercial general liability policy. Okay. Now, what happens at the state level is they use indemnification language and hold harmless agreements that essentially state that, listen, we're going to allow you to maintain our property, and contractually, you're not going to come out here and plow until there's 2 inches on the ground. And by the way, I'm going to make the decision that I want to salt, or when to tell you when to salt. So the contractor has absolutely no decision-making power on what to do on the property other than when it hits 2 inches and the property owner tells him when to salt. However, on page 8 of that contract, generally, there's an indemnification language clause. And that indemnification language says, you as the contractor are going to hold me as the property owner harmless for any and all incidents that happen on this property as a result of snow and ice.
Okay.
If you sign that contract and it snowed an inch, you are not contractually liable to go out and plow. You're actually not allowed to because they're not going to pay you for it. Yet, somebody slips and falls with an inch on the ground, you've also signed a contract that says you're responsible.
Yeah. Crazy.
And so it's crazy. Now, we've had great success. And remember, we've only been around for 4 years. And just a week and a half ago, in Michigan, House Bill 5230 was introduced that is our anti-indemnification bill that essentially says, listen, it's a snow contractor's responsibility to manage snow and ice, and we're okay with that. And if we damage your property or somebody slips and falls because we did a bad job, we're okay with that. That's what our insurance policy is for. However, you cannot, as the property owner, pass on your liability or negligence to us. So if you tell us not to plow, we can't be responsible for it.
Yeah. Well, that sounds interesting.
And so
we might want to.
It's a fair law.
Yeah, we want to track that. Is this somebody in the state of Michigan legislature?
Representative Ken Yonkers introduced it.
Okay, excellent. Say, Kevin, we're running against a technical limit of 100 megabytes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I love it. People speaking from their passions. That's the way work gets done. So I'll also keep an open invitation to do more of this at greater length. But I'm just telling you, we're running on. I've known by experience that our guy is going to give us a little bit of a hard time about going about 45 minutes. So
yeah, no. As a matter of fact, I'm just about finished up here. So
go ahead.
No. So we're good. So anyway, so the legislative side is the last piece to what the ASCA does as an organization, but we continually maintain the standard, and it all works together. You know, if you look at the standard in the education and the verification system, you know, through ISO, then you have the ability to potentially change, you know, the laws, and so that's what we've done. The standard it's the key to it. It is the foundation of everything that we've done. Has created the industry standards. And going through the ANSI process is a tremendous process to go through, and so that's where we're at. And I appreciate the opportunity to present today and to be on this call. So thank you.
So hang in there. I'm not sure if Jim Ginnity, I know he's on the call, but Jim Ginnity is president of the Simon Institute, and I think I alluded to earlier, we spend a lot of money on custodial. And, of course, there's all the risks associated with the kind of materials they have to use and where they're working, injuries and such and so forth. So we promoted this idea of getting an ANSI standard for custodial services, handling chemicals, how you identify work, how it gets done, etc. Jim, do you have any thoughts, if you're able to hear, and I'm not sure where the sound situation is, can you have some thoughts on what you're seeing here, Jim?
Yeah, all I have to say is wow. You know, this is really a good information for me because we're in the infancy of this. We've been working probably about a year and a half or so hard on this. We haven't got to a lot of ground unders, but I'll tell you, just hearing your talk really inspires me to, you know, that there is actually a light at the end of the tunnel, and would love to be able to sit down with you someday and just see how you're going through that process, because our group is totally a volunteer group. We don't actually have anybody sitting in a chair someplace that's dedicated for this. Mm-hmm. We know that will have to happen in the future, but I think you guys have done a great job. These are the things that we see also in our industry. Some of the things that you guys are seeing is, you know, these kind of weird little things, because we deal with slips and falls as well.
I know you do.
And we also deal with the ice and ice melt issues with, you know, those things getting on our buildings and what causes damage and things like that. So I think there's some things that we could probably get together on and talk about. Very interesting. In fact, I got your place on maps right now to my other monitor, seeing where you're at in Ohio. And
yep.
This is really encouraging to me because right now we're on the process of actually taking our first standard and taking it to ANSI and getting it vetted through the process of canvassing and that. And it's been a really slow, tedious process for us, again, because we have volunteer people and they'll be dedicated to it. But would really love to have a chat with you in the near future about how we can make this happen in our world too. What you're talking about is very important, I think, to the University of Michigan because we do deal with a lot of ICE issues, and it's just, and that's the thing we're dealing with too. Maybe not so much in the slips and falls of other people, but our own people and the workman's comp side of things, and how we can change things that would provide a safer, better environment for our workers.
Here's real quick, Jim. Here's a scary stat because a slip and fall by a client or a customer to a store, that number is 15,132. The average workers' comp claim from a slip and fall is $35,000.
Pretty amazing
when it goes through workers' comp, and so it's costing you more than 2 times for those. So that's a huge issue. I get it. Yeah, that's enormous for you guys.
Well, the other thing is we've got 40,000 students running around campus. We have a lot of young people. A lot of them will bounce off the concrete, but a lot of them won't. They might have fathers or attorneys. So, it's a different kind of a risk aggregation. I'm going to guess that campuses are a special case, and we'd be happy to extend the dimension of your document to deal with what we call cities within cities, campuses. We'd also like to see how we can roll out maybe some using some electronic sensing. There's different. I'm an electrical engineer, and we're trying to make our campuses smarter. So I'm always looking for different ideas about that. So we do need to close the call. Now, you want to say so? I see you have on the screen now House Bill 5230, and it looks like it was just introduced.
Yeah, it was just introduced a week and a half ago. I just wanted to put it up there. That is the bill that was introduced by Representative Ken Yonker in the state of Michigan. And as you can see, it purports any language that purports to indemnify, defend, or hold harmless, or has that effect, the promisee, which is a snow contractor. And it's real simple. From or against liability for loss or damage resulting from the negligence or omissions of the promisor, the property owner. So if it's the property owner's negligence or omissions, it should be their responsibility. And that's all this bill does, is it puts the proper responsibility on the proper party. We're working to get this through and get this passed in the state of Michigan. We've got a group of volunteers, as you guys have, snow contractors that are working diligently to get this through. And this is a bill that would not only help us, but it would also help you, because I'm guessing that on a college campus on a Saturday night at about 2:15, is a time when you might have some issues if it's snowing out.
Yeah, right.
And that would be the negligence or omissions of the promisor, or at that point, you've got to be responsible for yourself. Students
will bounce. So, okay, then I think what I'd like to do here is I'm going to stop the recording very shortly, but I wanted Christine, if she had if you have some thoughts here, reflections on what Kevin has told us here.
Well, I think it's really outstanding, all the progress that you made, and that you took advantage of the ANSI standards development system in order to achieve all of this. I know we're limited on time, but one last thought in my mind is to what extent did you feel that you had balanced interests represented during your standards development process?
And that's a great question. When we went to the ANSI side and when we dove in and got the property managers involved, we really achieved that balance. And they were very, very, very active, very vocal in what they would like to see, very positive in participating in the process, and very open into the challenges that they run into, because once you're able to have, we had the snow contractor side and insights on the challenges they ran into. But now you got their customers, and they're saying, well, you know what? We can't differentiate a snow contractor from a snow professional, or all of that stuff that we kind of knew. And having them feeding you information, feeding you the details of what they'd like to see, was just very, very positive.
Yeah.
Terrific.
What I'm showing you here is our journey with the Simon Institute.
Yes.
And other trade associations wanted to claim, all we wanted was a standard of care, and we wanted ANSI accredited, and it was challenged, and so I think I'm mentioning this just because just because now you've put into relief another industry's experience with ANSI standards. I'm not here trying to sell anything for ANSI, but it does you are operating in a halo where your standard of care does represent what I call leading practice discovery. So what I'm going to do here is I'll invite you on behalf of ANSI. I'm not sure where in Ohio you're at. I noticed it looks like you're an hour. Are you an hour? It's about 12 o'clock here right now. What are you time-wise?
It's 12 o'clock. We're in the same time zone.
Okay, good. All right. So you can drive on up. What city are you in Ohio?
Oh, I'm in Cleveland. I'm up in Michigan all the time. I get up to the northern suburbs quite a bit, up by Novi for some association shows that are up there.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I think you can. I'm not sure. I think it's free. I think it's free. You know, I think they better ANSI had better get their registration link fixed. But anyway, I thought I'd let you know that this is happening here. And obviously, as a member, you're allowed to come, and I'm sure they'd love to have you. So,
yeah, let me take a look at that link. I'm viewing yours, but that's Standards Michigan.
Yeah, if you go, usually.
And Kevin, we can put you on our invite list so that you'll get information sent to you.
That would be great. I would really, really appreciate it. I'm going to be up in Detroit in May. We don't have a final date, but I'm going to be giving. Well, the ASCA has a half-day seminar that we're providing to snow and ice management companies and professionals like yourself. Especially Jim, if you're interested in attending that, and maybe we can even sit down and chat before or after that too, because I'd like to spend some time kind of getting your perspective from it. But I'll send you guys information, you folks information on that once we have the final date confirmed.
Yeah, and maybe we're also going to be meeting up here in conjunction with that. With the ANSI meeting too, our group too. So,
oh, good.
And it would be really nice to be able to have somebody with your perspective and some experience. I mean, we look pretty similar as far as sizes and our resources. So that's what makes it really exciting for me. So.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I'm a phone call away for any questions you might have, and then let's figure out how we can get together and sit down and chat.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Good. All right.
2.5 hours away.
So I'm gonna.
Yeah, you're not far.
So I'm gonna stop this call, and then let me just finish the video recording here, and then we can continue talking. Thanks very much for your time, Kevin. We will have this video clip up in a matter of days on our YouTube channel, and that should do it.